now with regard to Donald Trump Jr. and the Russia investigation. Let's get right over to Capitol Hill, where Manu Raju is standing by with the news. Manu, what are you picking up?
Yeah, that's right. The Senate Judiciary Committee wants to interview Donald Trump Jr. as soon as next week. I'm told by the chairman of that committee, Republican Chuck Grassley, that he's writing a letter today that will be sent over to Donald Trump Jr. asking him to appear in a public session before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, this comes as the ranking Democrat in the committee told me earlier that she would like to see him as soon as next week, and both of them are not ruling out the idea of issuing subpoenas if he does not comply to the request. Now, this comes, of course, after Donald Trump Jr. revealed, following a number of revelations in the media, that he did have a meeting in 2016 with a Russian lawyer, a lawyer who apparently wanted to help them provide dirt on the Clinton campaign as part of an effort that Donald Trump Jr. was told by the Russian government to help his father's campaign. This, of course, has caused a lot of concern among both parties on Capitol Hill and a lot of questions that members in some key committees want to get answers from Donald Trump Jr. himself. And so that is one reason why Chuck Grassley and Dianne Feinstein are teaming up and discussing bringing forward Donald Trump Jr. before their committee as soon as next week. Now, this comes also as the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Intelligence Committee have also expressed interest in speaking to him. It's unclear if that will happen and when that will happen, or if it will be done in a public setting or behind closed doors. But a very significant development, Kate, because Grassley wants to not only talk to Donald Trump Jr., but also Paul Manafort, the former campaign chairman, who was also in that meeting as well. So we'll see if these two men agree to testify or if they actually issue subpoenas to compel their appearance, Kate.
This goes without saying, of course, Manu, this isn't just a big deal because he's calling in someone who was a close advisor to the president throughout the campaign in light of that bombshell news. This is the president's eldest son being sent a letter, being asked to testify in a public setting before the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's coming from Republicans, too. I mean, the question that I asked Chuck Grassley, I said, well, what do you want to hear from him? He said, well, there have been a lot of questions about these meetings. This will be an opportunity for Donald Trump Jr. to explain to the public what happened. Now, of course, what will be significant about this is that this would happen under oath. Everything that Donald Trump Jr. has said so far, of course, has been over Twitter or his appearance on Sean Hannity's program, but has not come under oath. So you have to, of course, tell the truth under oath, and it also means that all questions about his any past conversations that he had with any Russian officials, his past ties to Moscow in any way, all of which will be explored. Now, I should say, Kate, Donald Trump Jr. said that he'd be willing to testify under oath. He said that to Sean Hannity, so presumably he would be okay with this request, but we'll see what he says, especially when this letter comes today that Chuck Grassley just told me moments ago that they are planning on sending this letter today asking him to appear before the committee, Kate.
Thank you so much, Monty, for bringing it. Really appreciate it. We'll continue to follow this. That's big news on Capitol Hill. Also happening right now, President Trump. He is meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris, and very soon the president will face reporters in a news conference. And it is a safe bet at this point that he will likely be asked about an entirely different meeting, not the one with the French president, but the one between his son and a Russian lawyer during the 2016 campaign. We're going to be watching that, of course, very closely, and we're also watching this. Years of promises, days of threats, and now a new version of the Republican plan to overhaul Obamacare is about to hit the Senate. A plan that could affect every American in one way or another. This hour, Republican leaders will be unveiling the newest plan to senators behind closed doors. The big question, of course, does this bill change the math? Remember, they can only afford to lose 2 of their own and still get the plan over the finish line because no Democrats are likely to support. And also, breaking news at this hour, we have the new details of a new alternative that 2 Republican senators are getting ready to roll out to the health care plan. First, we'll get to that in just a moment, but let's get first to CNN's Ryan Nobles on Capitol Hill. So, Ryan, what are you hearing? What's the state of play? What's the mood up there right now?
Kate, the best way to describe Capitol Hill this morning is nervous anticipation. That bill yet to be released to the public. We expect it sometime in this hour, and then Republican senators are going to gather for an all-GOP meeting where they discuss the details of this plan. Kate, keep in mind that most Republican senators have still not seen the actual bill itself. They've been relying on bits of information here and there from the GOP leadership team that is crafting this bill. One of the big controversies so far this morning, will there be an amendment that was crafted by Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Mike Lee that will deal with insurers, allowing insurers to offer insurance plans that do not fall under the regulations of the Affordable Care Act? This is a key provision that conservatives are looking for. There was some talk that a version of the Cruz amendment will appear in this bill. But this morning, Senator Mike Lee from Utah tweeting that he has not seen the bill, but he knows that the one that he and Ted Cruz wrote will not be in the bill, some version of it, and he's not sure if he can support it. So we'll wait to see the contents of this bill and the reaction. As you mentioned, Kate, a very small margin for error if Republicans hope to get this passed.
As it has been since the beginning. The devil is in the details on this when it comes to getting Republicans on board. Ryan, thank you so much. We're watching that closely. That's happening this hour. And also this, now to the new alternative, we can call it. I want to bring in Chief Political Correspondent Dana Bash for much more on this. So, Dana, Lindsey Graham, Bill Cassidy, they think they've got the solution here. They think they can thread the needle. What do we know about what they're planning to roll out?
Well, first of all, as Ryan just laid out, Kate, the prospects for the current Senate Republican health care bill, which will be unveiled for all Republican senators, is still very much in jeopardy. So knowing that, Senators Lindsey Graham and Bill Cassidy have been working feverishly behind the scenes with GOP colleagues to craft a GOP alternative, as you said. And the health care bill is something that we actually have the first details on right here. First, the gist is it would keep federal taxes on wealthy Americans in place and then block grant the money to states to control. Now, Graham and Cassidy, who have been working very closely with their former colleague, former Senator Rick Santorum, argue that one of the main reasons that Republicans are having such a hard time agreeing on a health care replacement bill is because they're working from the Obamacare template, particularly federal control of health insurance. Another big problem with the Senate Republican bill unveiled last month is that it effectively gives a tax cut to wealthy Americans and then makes cuts to Medicaid, which helps many afford health insurance. So the key now to whether or not this new alternative will work is whether they can get buy-in from Republican governors. That is their focus. Many Republican governors feel their states and constituents benefited from Obamacare. Many of them have a lot of sway with pivotal GOP senators. But the hope,
right.
Exactly. The hope among Graham and Cassidy and Santorum, who's working with them, is that this is, politically probably a Hail Mary. But policy-wise, they argue that it is good for Republicans because it makes conservatives happy by sending control to the states and GOP moderates happy by maintaining some of the critical health that their constituents need, Kate.
And they're just going to be rolling this out. Is there do you get any sense yet of where the buy-in, forget the governors for a second, but the buy-in from fellow Republicans is at the moment?
The answer is they don't know. They said that they're having a lot of people, conversations with a lot of people who like the idea, but you can't underestimate the Republican governors, particularly for some of the vulnerable Republican senators, again, some of whom represent states where Obamacare is actually working. They feel that if those Republican governors say, hey, this is a good idea, I can work with this, then that could get the ball rolling. Look, here's the reality. What the Republican leadership and what the president wants is 50 votes. They want to get 50 Republican votes. They want something that can pass. And if what they're working on to fix the current Republican bill, if they can get 50 votes, okay. If not, what Graham and Cassidy are hoping is that this is an alternative that is different, that could kind of shake things up a bit.
Yeah, and at this point, you've mentioned a Hail Mary. At this point, maybe that's what they need at this point.
Exactly.
So we will see. We're in Hail Mary territory because I know you and I are so good at football. Great to see you. Thanks so much. And in a moment, as Dan and I were just discussing, in a moment, we're going to have a CNN exclusive. Senators Lindsey Graham and Bill Cassidy, men behind this proposal, will be joining me live on this new health care effort. Get their take on it. That is coming up. Stay with us. Also, any moment right now, we are expecting to see President Trump and French President Macron sitting down together for a bilateral meeting this hour. The two leaders and their wives, they met already this morning in Paris. You see Trump and Macron right there are exchanging another handshake, and I will leave it to you to decipher how that compares to one of the last kind of famous or infamous handshakes. So let's get over to Paris right now. That's where CNN's Sarah Murray is standing by, traveling with the president. So, Sarah, what are we expecting? We saw the greeting. We saw them kind of touring around together today. What are we expecting from the leaders today?
Well, now they're in this more formal bilateral meeting. This is where the sort of the meatier, the more substantive part of this will happen. They're expected to talk about counterterrorism. They're expected to talk about strategies for dealing with Syria. These are areas where President Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron sort of see the world in a similar light. Now, what was not listed as a key topic that they're planning on talking about is climate change. Now, it's certainly something that could come up. We know this is a place where these two world leaders differ. And as always with President Trump, you really never know what's going to come up in these bilateral meetings. He might bring up something else along the way. One of the things advisors mentioned, they might compare notes about who they met with at the G20 and how they felt about different world leaders, for instance, Russian President Vladimir Putin. But after that becomes the even more unpredictable part. That is when we will see them both in front of the camera. Each of them will make statements, and they will take questions from the press, 2 from the American press, 2 from the French press. And this is where you can bet President Trump is going to be asked about this meeting with his son Donald Trump Jr. had. It was last summer with a Russian lawyer. This will be the first time President Trump is answering these questions publicly in front of cameras. He has made a couple of comments about how he doesn't necessarily blame his son in interviews, but there is a broader question about credibility in this White House at this point. Why should the American public, why should the world community believe what the president's saying after they gave so many blanket denials that there were no contacts among anyone with any Russian officials, and then drip, 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 more meetings continue to emerge like the one that we've been talking about these last few days with Donald Trump Jr. and the Russian lawyer. So that's certainly something to watch for as this press conference gets closer, Kate.
Absolutely. Great to see you, Sarah. Thank you so much. We're going to keep an eye. We'll be waiting for that news conference to start. When it does, of course, CNN will bring it to you live. With me now, though, right now, CNN national security and legal analyst and former NSA attorney Susan Hennessy is here. White House reporter for the Washington Post, Abby Phillip, is here, and national security correspondent for the New York Times, David Sanger, is joining us as well. Great to see all of you. So, David, first to you on the news that Mani Raju brought to us at the very top of the hour, this breaking news that Senate Judiciary Committee will be sending a letter to Donald Trump Jr. requesting that he come to testify in a public session before the committee, and they were talking as early as next week. That's a big development.
Well, this is also one you've got to expect. Once, if you think about the sequence of events that started this, Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, had failed to disclose some meetings that he had been in. He submitted his form, updated form. It revealed this meeting, and that led to the cascade of events that took the Times to the emails, which ultimately Donald Trump Jr. Revealed. So here you've got a committee that feels like once again it's playing catch-up both to the media and to a White House that keeps saying, as your report out all the meetings with the Russians, and then there's always just one more. This one being particularly notable for one reason. What those emails establish more than anything else is that the campaign was notified by an intermediary that the Russian government wanted to go help them and wanted to provide information. And the usual thing to do when you got that about an adversary government is turn it over immediately to the FBI.
And that's not what appears, at least at this moment, to have happened here. I mean, Abby, the White House...
Not happened by anybody's account, yes.
Yeah, exactly, by anyone's account. I will, of course, be open to more information coming to light. But, Abby, at this point, the White House has to expect that the president is going to be getting questions about this today. Not only the evolution of defenses that came from Donald Trump Jr., but kind of an evolution in these statements coming from the president as well. It started out as kind of a terse statement, I didn't know about the meeting, and then it turned into denying knowing anything about the meeting, and now he's defending the meeting by saying anybody would have taken it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the central question that underlies this whole thing is, did the president know about this meeting? Did he know about the context in which this meeting happened? There were a couple of things in those emails that that have emerged in the last couple of days that Don Jr.'s intermediary, who conveyed to him that the Russian government wanted to help his father, also asked and suggested that he might present this information directly to Trump himself through Trump's sort of secretary, who would have been a sort of gatekeeper for information for the president. So that is unresolved. Was there ever an attempt to pass this information directly to the president? And then hours after Don Jr. confirmed that he was going to go ahead and meet with this Russian lawyer, the president then went out and said, you know, I have some information about Hillary Clinton and her dealings with foreign governments, including Russia, that I'm going to present to you guys in a press conference next week. That press conference never happened, but a lot of people are looking at those comments and saying, what happened there? What was Trump referring to? Was he suggesting that maybe the information that Don Jr. would have gotten as a result of this meeting, he would have then conveyed to the American public in a press conference, but because the meeting really turned up nothing, the press conference never really happened. So there's a really big question mark here. There's a reason why nobody really wants to talk about what the president knew and when. The statements that he only found out in the last couple of days are going to become extremely important as more information is uncovered about what happened here.
And of course, Don Jr. says he never talked to his dad about it because he didn't think that it was worthwhile, but he may be asked that very same question under oath, as we're now learning from the Senate Judiciary Committee, so we'll see what happens. And Susan, the president did an interview with Reuters and spoke about this, but also spoke about his meeting with President Putin, where there obviously are some conflicting reports about exactly what was said and what came out of it. I mean, to Reuters, the president would not say if he believed Putin's denial of interfering in the election. But he also wouldn't clearly say if he trusted Putin in another point of the interview, which I found fascinating. Are those hard questions to answer for a president?
Well, they shouldn't be difficult. I mean, it really does speak to the lack of credibility. I mean, his decision not to include anybody other than Secretary of State Rex Tillerson in the meeting. There really wasn't anyone in that room with external credibility who can say this is what happened. The other issue is that the president himself has not been consistent about whether or not he believes there was Russian interference in the election. He goes back and forth. He says it could have been anyone. It's pretty clear that he himself is not convinced or is not willing to really consistently publicly acknowledge this reality.
Yeah, guys, stand by if you will. We've got a lot more coming up. I really appreciate it, though. Here we come. So what did the president know, as Abby was just laying out? What did the president know and when about this meeting? Lawmakers are demanding answers now with an urgent push to get Donald Trump Jr. and others to testify. I'm going to speak live with a member of the House Intelligence Committee. It's coming up. Plus, moments from now, also, Republicans will be holding an all-hands-on-deck meeting on the fate of their health care efforts. But before they do, I'm going to speak live with two senators who are rolling out a new idea. Lindsey Graham, Bill Cassidy. That's next.
Cyber criminals around the world are scouring the dark web, looking to steal your
day with Chris Cuomo and Allison Camerata.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your new day. It is Wednesday, July 13th, 8 o'clock here in the East. Chris is off. John Berman joins me this morning. Great to have you.
Good to be here.
Okay, up first, President Trump is in Paris, and he is ready to meet with President Macron. But all the focus at this hour is on this upcoming press conference. It'll be just a few hours from now, and Mr. Trump has been out of the public spotlight all week, but he will not be able to escape questions about, we assume, the email, his son's email scandal that has been gripping Washington, because the president's going to be facing questions from journalists today. The president's still defending Don Jr., insisting that many people would have taken that meeting with a Russian lawyer to get dirt on an election rival.
Now, all of this is going on as the battle for health care heats up. A crucial moment today on Capitol Hill. Senate Republicans will unveil the latest version of their bill to repeal and replace Obamacare. Have enough changes been made to get enough votes to pass? CNN Sarah Murray kicks off her coverage. She's traveling with the president in Paris. Sarah.
President Trump is slated to take questions today alongside French President Emmanuel Macron. This as a political firestorm is still brewing back in Washington. This one centered on the president's own son, Donald Trump Jr., and his meeting with a Russian lawyer. Now, this will be President Trump's first opportunity out in public to take questions about the latest Russia revelation that's rocking the White House. President Trump touching down in Paris, hoping to forge stronger ties with France's new president. But the trip overshadowed by the president's son's admission in emails that he met last year with a Russian lawyer believed to have dirt on Hillary Clinton from the Kremlin. Ahead of the trip, the president defending Donald Trump Jr. in a Reuters interview, saying most of the phony politicians who are Democrats that act holier than thou, if the same thing happened to them, they would have taken that meeting in a heartbeat. President Trump insisting that there was zero coordination between his campaign and Russia, referring to collusion accusations as a hoax made up by Democrats and the greatest con job in history. A characterization rejected by Trump's FBI director nominee at his confirmation hearing on Wednesday.
As the future FBI director, you consider this endeavor a witch hunt?
I do not consider Director Mueller to be on a witch hunt.
The president again saying he only learned about his son's meeting with the Russian lawyer in the past few days. Although exclusive video obtained by CNN from the 2013 Miss USA pageant shows the president schmoozing with the Russian family at the center of the controversy.
The most powerful people in all of Russia, the richest men in Russia.
President Trump also asked if he believes Vladimir Putin's denial on election interference. The president dodging instead of siding with his own intelligence chiefs, responding, something happened and we have to find out what it is.
So when I keep hearing about that he would have rather had Trump, I think probably not.
In a separate interview, the president again questions the U.S. intelligence community and their conclusion that Russia meddled in the election to harm Hillary Clinton.
If Hillary had won, our military would be decimated. Our energy would be much more expensive. That's what Putin doesn't like about me. Congratulations, great job.
With the White House under fire, the president is hoping to change the narrative with his visit to France.
We want to reassure everybody, as we did at the G20, as Secretary Maddow and the Vice President have done in recent visits, that we stand by our allies, we stand by Article 5.
Presidents Trump and Emmanuel Macron looking to put their differences aside after Trump abruptly pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. Now, the relationship between Trump and Macron got off to something of an awkward start. Who can forget that very bizarre handshake? But they will have plenty of time to spend together today. In addition to a formal bilateral meeting, they'll, of course, be giving those statements, taking questions from the press. And then later this evening, they'll be joined by their spouses for dinner at the Eiffel Tower. Back to you guys.
Okay, our thanks to Sarah Murray, who has an awesome assignment there in Paris. Joining us now, our panel, we have senior Washington correspondent for Politico.com, Anna Palmer, senior political writer for the website 538, Perry Bacon, and associate editor and columnist for Real Clear Politics, A.B. Stoddard. Great to have all of you. A.B., let's talk about what we're all looking forward to as journalists, which is the press conference that will be coming up, but we don't exactly know the format of it, if it will be sort of freewheeling, how long it'll take, how many journalists will be allowed to ask questions. What do we anticipate will come up?
Well, I think obviously President Trump is going to be answering questions about Donald Jr.'s emails and meeting, and he will probably, I think, be as defiant as he's been about how the meeting would have been one that most people would have taken, including Democrats, and that it's no big deal, that basically it's a media witch hunt and it's being overblown, and that this whole collusion idea is a hoax. That's what he's said the last couple of days, and I think he'll repeat that. But I do think that when he's asked about other things, maybe by the French press, that, you know, I expect President Trump to be really charming about his meeting, the invitation that President Macron extended to him and his visit there. I think he's going to talk about how they've got a lot in common. They're going to be fighting, you know, against ISIS as a unified coalition, and they're going to go forward with, you know, common interests. I think he's going to be really positive, as he usually is in these settings, about one-on-one meetings. And except for that one in Washington with Angela Merkel, he tries to usually pretend things are pretty great, and I think he was tickled to be invited, and I think he's delighted to be out of the U.S., and he's finding these trips abroad far more pleasurable than he expected, and his team usually sees them as a success. So he likes to be on the world stage, he likes these parades and all the festivities. So I think it'll be a good day for Trump, and I think that he'll probably get through those questions quickly with the same defiance that we usually see.
And he's given us a preview in a way of how he will answer questions about his son Don Jr.'s email exchange over this meeting with the Russian lawyer. He, on the one hand, said that anyone would have taken this meeting. Many people would have taken this meeting. Also, in an interview with Reuters, he said there was zero coordination. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. There's no coordination. This was a hoax. This was made up by the Democrats. This is the greatest con job in history, where a party sits down the day after they got their ass kicked and say, huh, what's our excuse? You know, Anna, Is that where the White House has settled right now? And is that argument why the reports are this morning that the White House thinks that things are going better for them now in defense of the Don Jr. email?
Listen, I think we've seen a lot of different statements over the past couple of days as they've tried to get a handle on this latest scandal, from, kind of the many statements that Donald Trump Jr. has said to where the White House is. I think that, Donald Trump, the president, loves to kind of control the narrative. He did his television interview, the first one in a long time that wasn't on Fox News. He did an interview with Reuters. So this is a preview in terms of where he thinks the biggest of the kind of win for them is to say, this is nothing. I was in the Capitol yesterday. I'll be there today. And let me tell you, senators and House members think this is a big deal, Republicans and Democrats, and they are very excited and interested in terms of pressing, Don Jr. and some of these other people about what exactly happened in this meeting.
And let's talk about that, Perry, because Don Jr. is not in the administration. He's not Michael Flynn. And some of these other threads do seem to kind of evaporate after a while. Why are the Don Jr. emails in a different category?
I mean, mainly because this is the first kind of explicit thing where we've had someone, Donald Jr. is not Carter Page. He's someone who's Donald Trump's son. He's still in Donald Trump's circle, I assume. And he's sort of in these emails, this more explicit, he loves, as the word love is in the email, actually loves the idea that they can get some information from the Russians, maybe help win the election. So now we sort of have two facts. We have the Trump campaign was open to receiving information from the Russians, and we know that the Russians sort of packed into John Podesta and the DNC email. So what we don't know is kind of the middle ground there, which is, did Don Jr. wanted that help? Did the Russians give that help with some kind of coordination with the Trump campaign? We don't know the answer to that question, and that's still the core question. So we're still searching, but the story still has much more to go.
AB, I'm interested by Anna's reporting. She was up on the Hill hearing from many people in Congress saying that they are keenly interested in this, and they think it's a very big deal. I'm wondering if you're hearing the same thing, especially with the Senate Judiciary Committee asking to speak to Paul Manafort next week. Again, he was part of that meeting with the Russian lawyer. Then there's the issue of Jared Kushner, the one person in that meeting who actually works inside the White House right now, who may be in a very different kind of jeopardy over all this than even Don Jr., AB.
Right. Well, the thing is, John, is that in the White House, there are obviously suspicions that Jared Kushner's legal team, or Jared Kushner, with his sort of implicit approval, they were the ones who located this email, and that they were the ones who sort of, quote unquote, threw Don Jr. under the bus, because Don Jr. does not have a role in the White House. He's not a part of the government, and he actually doesn't face any real legal exposure for this. Collusion's not a crime. These campaign finance provisions are a little bit of a stretch at best, and that he's not obviously going to be charged with treason, which is not, it just doesn't relate to what he did and was involved in. And so the Jared Kushner at this point, by any definition, should not have his security clearance. It should be revoked. He had to adjust his SF-86 forms 3 times because he failed to disclose meetings with Russians, the bankers, and this meeting, et cetera. And so the investigations are expanding, both the congressional ones in Senate Intel, House Intel, Senate Judiciary, as well as Robert Mueller's investigation. They are not shrinking. They're not coming to a conclusion. They are growing, and the heat is on. What happened over the weekend is a turning point. It's the first time we saw some reference to the Russian government's interest in helping Trump, interest on the part of Don Jr. to meet with those people who were connected to the government and wanted to help his father. No surprise at the letter indicating that the government was trying to help his father. This is very disturbing revelation for Republicans on the Hill, just as Anna heard. They are not publicly coming out and saying we think this administration is in peril, but what they're going to do is put the heat on policy, both on that sanctions bill up in the House, where they are not going to include the weakening waivers that the White House is asking for, and are going to force the strong Senate legislation forward, trying to press this administration to retaliate against Russia for meddling in the election.
So, Anna, what does this mean about what's happening inside the White House in terms of their agenda and in terms of the different factions that we always hear about? Is it possible that there is this now chasm between Don Jr., the president's son, and Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law?
There's a lot of palace intrigue, every day, every week, who's up, who's down. There was some reporting earlier this week about Ryan Priebus, and somehow the chief of staff, this was kind of coming down on him when, you know, I think we put in playbook, there's actually no way that this has anything to do with him. So I think as far as, you know, is somebody going to get fired out of this, we're not hearing that, but it definitely increases tension, particularly as the Senate is trying to move forward on this health care bill, you know, one of the biggest promises that Trump had on the campaign trail. This is another distraction. This is another thing where when Trump and his aides go to the Capitol Hill, it puts them in a weaker position in terms of leverage, in terms of, you know, asking senators to do this for them.
Everything is connected. All right, guys, stick around. The pressure on the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell as the Republicans get ready to unveil the latest version of their health care bill that happens today. What changes are being made? Do they have the votes? CNN's Suzanne Malveaux live for us on Capitol Hill. Suzanne.
Hey, good morning, John. Well, they can only afford to lose if it's 3 votes, it is dead, and it's about 3 hours or so before we get this latest version. Already 2 Republicans have said they don't like it. Conservative Senator Rand Paul says that it does not do enough to repeal Obamacare because of taxes, subsidies, and regulations that stay intact. Also, moderate Senator Susan Collins says it goes too far because of those Medicaid cuts. We are going to see Vice President Pence back here at the White House, rather on the Capitol Hill, making a cameo appearance to try to convince those senators and others to get it over the top. In the meantime, you've got President Trump, who is 6 time zones away. Some lawmakers prefer that he has been hands-off on the latest round of negotiations, but he is now speaking out and issuing this warning.
I am sitting in the Oval Office with a pen in hand, waiting for our senators to give it to me.
What will happen if they don't?
Well, I don't even want to talk about it because I think it would be very bad. I will be very angry about it, and a lot of people will be very upset.
Just a few things that we know are in the revised version. $45 billion for opioid addiction treatment. Also, taxes on wealthy Americans remaining, not repealed as you had in the previous bill. More money for stabilization funds. And finally, no major changes when it comes to Medicaid. And that's a big problem for moderates because it still means severe cuts. John? Allison.
Suzanne, thank you very much. So are Republicans working behind the scenes to come together to pass some health care legislation? We're going to ask a senator who could be one of the deciding votes. Next.
You might take something for your heart, your joints.
Bill, President.
Amendment, speaking to folks in the insurance market.
All right, Senate Republicans will unveil the latest version of their health care bill. President Trump sending this message to his party as they're struggling to find common ground.
I am sitting in the Oval Office with a pen in hand, waiting for our senators to give it to me.
What will happen if they don't?
Well, I don't even want to talk about it because I think it would be very bad. I will be very angry about it, and a lot of people will be very upset.
Joining us now, Republican Senator in position, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. Senator, thank you so much for joining us. We've had some very interesting discussions on health care a few hours away from Mitch McConnell unveiling what he's going to do here. Can you give us a preview of where you think this is headed today?
Well, we will hear about the bill. We'll discuss it around 11:30. Speak to it even longer at lunch. I'm providing lunch today, good seafood from Louisiana, so I'm looking forward to my lunch. And then we'll hear the CBO score early next week. There'll be a lot of discussion over the weekend. There'll be amendments being prepared that I think the amendments may make this bill hopefully more acceptable to those who are still concerned about it. And we'll see.
We know you're going to approve of lunch. The question is, will you end up approving of the health care bill, Senator? Ted Cruz, Senator Cruz of Texas, is offering an amendment which would allow states to opt out of basically some of the essential health benefit guarantees, as long as they also offer a version of sort of the Obamacare guarantees. Is that an amendment you could support?
So I've been working with Senator Cruz, looking at that particular amendment, speaking to folks in the insurance market. The question is, will it be 2 risk pools in which, you know, you're on your own if you get a car wreck, or is it going to be a common risk pool in which everybody kind of does what insurance does, using the law of big numbers? So if a young person gets in a car wreck, there's actually an insurance pool to help them. And so the insurance companies right now seem to tell us that that may not work the way that Senator Cruz has initially constructed it. I'll be discussing with him possible alternatives. We'll see.
Right. I mean,
this process of amendments is actually the process of getting us closer to yes, and I look forward to that process of amendments.
One of the issues that some people say when they look at that, some critics say, is it removes the price protections for people with pre-existing conditions. Yes, they might still be offered insurance under that one plan. That's sort of the exception in there, but the prices on it, the rates on it could be hiked substantially, which to me, when I was looking at it, would seem to violate your rule, which, you know, you made famous in a discussion we had, the Jimmy Kimmel test, which is that everyone should be able to afford the health care that they need. That would seem to be a problem in terms of being able to afford something if you had pre-existing conditions, correct?
It could be a problem. Now, one thing that the bill does have that we know of is a large amount of money for states to put in what is called a stabilization fund. And so it could be that we can, states could do what Maine did prior to Obamacare and have a reinsurance pool so that those folks who have a pre-existing condition would be reinsured, and so that would keep the premiums lower for that person, but also for the entire group. So it may be possible to combine a so-called Cruz amendment with something where the extra dollars, the billions being given to states, would mitigate that effect.
Still work to be done, though, in your mind on that. Then there's the issue
totally.
of Medicaid, which is hugely important to a lot of people, including your colleague Susan Collins, with whom you've submitted your own plan that's separate for this. But she's very, very concerned about the fact that 15 million people, so says the CBO, 15 fewer million people would be on Medicaid after this bill is passed. My understanding is that even with all the changes being proposed today, some of those Medicaid cuts, for lack of a better word, and I don't want to argue whether they're cuts or not, those will still be in it.
Yeah, but that's going to be, the principal cuts will be in 2025 and beyond. Now, keep in mind, under Obamacare, there were similar cuts beginning in 2020. And so this is actually the same type of language that was in Obamacare, but it's postponed till 2025. I'm not saying it's not an issue, but I'm saying that everybody was quite comfortable with it under Obamacare, but the same folks are kind of uncomfortable with it under this proposal. 2025 is 8 years off, so if the inflation rate turns out to be higher, there's plenty of time to adjust. That was probably the rationale under Obamacare. So for those folks nervous about it, just kind of think about your comfort level where it was with Obamacare.
Yeah, just to be clear what I'm hearing for you, and then I will move on to a different subject. Are you more optimistic about passage today than you were yesterday?
I am neither optimistic nor pessimistic. It's just a rule in life that if you work hard at something and work in good faith, that good things tend to happen. I will continue to work hard in good faith over this weekend up to the vote, trying to make good things happen.
Are you closer to yes now than you were?
I haven't seen the bill yet.
Right, that's a good point.
Yeah, I have to read the bill, and then I will know. Until then, I withhold judgment.
All right, I want to talk to you about some of the things the president has said about the revelations really over the last few days about what his son did last year, holding a meeting with a Russian lawyer under the promise that this lawyer would provide negative information from the Russian government about his opponent, Hillary Clinton. The president of the United States says that many people would have taken this meeting. You, Senator, have run in elections yourself. There is the quote right there. I think many people would have held that meeting. Would you, Senator Cassidy, have held that meeting?
I would not have held that meeting. What we don't know about Donald Trump Jr., was he clueless or was he clued in, number one? Number two, was it illegal or illegal? That will be an important distinction for the attorneys, and that's going to be ultimately, if it was legal and he was clued in, that'll be a question for the voter to handle, and that I'm sure will be litigated at the next election.
Clueless or clued in? Explain.
Well, if he's clueless, kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening here, sure, I'll show up, maybe you can, give a little bit of a pass. If it was a clued in, oh yes, I'm very much wired into both sides of this argument. Well, I think the voter will be a lot harsher in her judgment.
Clueless. I mean, the email, which I'm sure you've read at this point, because we all have, the email flat out said this information is coming from the Russian government, which wants to help your father's campaign and hurts Hillary Clinton. So, by definition, what's on paper, he wasn't clueless to that, was he?
No, he wasn't clueless to that, but he could have been clueless as to the implications. I don't know Donald Trump Jr. I'm just old enough to know that you've got to understand the entirety of what's happening before you make a judgment.
I get that, and I get he may not have been involved with politics before, but as an American citizen, whether or not you've ever been involved in politics, does that pass the smell test?
So, John, I'm totally agreeing with where you're going. We have to investigate and we have to know its motivations, if you will. But I hope you'll go where I'm going, which is to withhold judgment until we actually have kind of the total investigations by FBI, by the Senate Bipartisan Committee, by the House Bipartisan Committee, and then make judgment. What we don't want to do is jump to a conclusion, even as transparent as that conclusion may seem, because frankly, that's not what we do in America.
Well, what you could, based on what we know, there's not enough information to say whether or not he should have gone to that meeting based on that email alone?
I will tell you that in my judgment, I would not have gone. But on the other hand, because this is being spun, as you began to spun right then, into a larger kind of effort of collusion, that's where I'm going to withhold judgment.
I'm not trying to spin it into anything. All I'm trying to say is it's right there on paper, and to an extent what we're beginning to hear from the White House is an effort at normalization. Many people would have done this. You now have said you would not have done it.
I would not have done it, but on the other hand, frankly, if you say many people, that's a sort of elastic statement that you can make. But I will say once more that I can accept that. I can say I would not have done that, but I will withhold judgment on the whole body of the issue until the appropriate agencies have finished their investigation.
Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, enjoy lunch. Send some our way. Always appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you, John.
Allison?
That does sound delicious.
Doesn't it?
Yes. I love Louisiana food. Meanwhile, in a rare moment of bipartisan unity on Capitol Hill at the confirmation hearing for President Trump's pick to be FBI director. Our next guest says, however, he sees a firestorm on the horizon for the FBI. What does that mean? Senator Richard Blumenthal tells us next. Is being somewhat overshadowed by the controversy over Don Jr.'s emails, revealing a previously undisclosed meeting between top Trump campaign members and a Russian lawyer. In a new interview, the president tells Reuters that, quote, many people, unquote, would have taken that meeting if the opportunity presented itself. Let's discuss this and more with Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal. He serves on the Judiciary Committee, which is investigating Russian election interference. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
Now that we've all seen Don Jr.'s emails in black and white on the front page of the papers, where he expressed his interest and even enthusiasm about getting dirt on Hillary Clinton from what he thought was a high-level Russian source, what do you do about that? What is Congress going to do about that?
We are investigating not only Russian interference in the election campaign, which was extraordinary, unprecedented in its scope and sophistication, but also the potential Trump campaign collusion with that Russian interference. And these emails are bombshell evidence of criminal intent, often the most difficult element.
What do you mean that they are bombshells of criminal intent?
What they show is, as you said so well just a few minutes ago, interest and enthusiasm for working with the Russians on interfering in the election. And
well, hold on a second. I just want to press back on this because it's not criminal, it's not a crime to develop opposition research on your opponent.
Correct. Not if it comes from legitimate sources and it's obtained by legitimate means. If it's obtained by hacking into the DNC, which is a violation of law, it involves a conspiracy to violate the law and the intent on the part of Manafort, Kushner, Trump Jr. to be part of that illegal effort.
But you're connecting these two things, which we don't see a nexus of. You're connecting the Russian hack at the DNC with whatever this meeting was that Don Jr. was trying to arrange.
The meeting was to obtain information. The hacking was the means to obtain that information. And there is more evidence that has to be elicited. No question that we're very far from criminal charges here and from proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But if you're asking what's the significance of these emails, it is criminal intent, which is often the most difficult part of any case to prove. You know, these words, I love it, will haunt Donald Trump Jr. I can see a prosecutor's closing argument repeating those words again and again and again because they show what the purpose and motive was of this meeting.
They show intent, but what's the name of that crime? What's the name of the crime that loves opposition research?
if you want the specific statutes that may have been violated, 18 United States Code.
Lindsey Graham and Senator Bill Cassidy, two Republicans unveiling a new health care plan this hour they think will help Republicans finally get their efforts over the finish line. In short, their alternative plan would leave Obamacare taxes on the wealthy in place and send that money in block grants to the states to manage health care, basically trying to take it out of the hands of the federal government. This as President Trump prepares for a joint news conference with French President Macron in Paris, where he's expected, of course, to face questions about two of his family members, Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, both under fire, facing growing scrutiny about their involvement in a meeting that they had with a Russian attorney. A lot to discuss, clearly. With me right now to do just that, Rick Santorum is here, CNN political commentator, former Republican senator, and former presidential candidate. Hillary Rosen is here, CNN political commentator and Democratic strategist. Senator, first to health care, if we could. You were deeply involved in pulling together this proposal, this idea that Senator Graham and Cassidy just announced. How does this thread the needle to get enough Republicans on board?
Yeah, one of the reasons that I brought this to Lindsey and actually to many conservatives up on Capitol Hill is because this is really a redo of something that was successfully accomplished with bipartisan support, I might add, back in 1996 called welfare reform. And that is that you give sufficient amount of money to the states to deal with the problem, and then you let the states innovate. And we did that through a block grant proposal called TANF, which is Transitional Assistance to Needy Families. And by the way, that block grant has not been increased in 20 years. Why? Because the states were able to successfully innovate, drive down costs, get people off welfare to work. And we're saying, let's use the same model that is considered the greatest Republican success, and by the way, Democrats tout it as a great success too. And let's find common ground here again. Get this money out of Washington, drain the swamp, stop the money from being orchestrated and spent and managed here in Washington. Get it out to the states. Let innovation, put some cost containment in there to drive innovation and better quality care, and let the states do it in 50 laboratories of success.
So. But Hillary, part of that is they're not getting rid of the Obamacare taxes on the wealthy that Democrats were very upset about. Is this a positive step forward?
Well, sure, leaving those taxes in there help fund the bill, but this is just sort of a silly approach, I think. I get that if you were sort of starting in welfare that maybe you would do that, but here we have millions of people who have signed up with the federal health care system to go into a state-by-state plan, which the new plan still doesn't address how this is going to help the states bolster their individual exchanges. And then you have a complete switch now where everybody has to go reapply all over the place, not knowing whether their state is going to end up having the resources to support the plan. So it sort of looks like a solution without a problem to me. And I think what we're finding is that the Republicans are really struggling to make a bill that has this system look different than it is, but not have any of the downsides of what they know that people really don't want. Which I wonder, why bother do anything at all? Just support the existing system with fixes that bring people actual health care. All the senator's proposal is going to do is going to turn around the system upside down and not give anybody better